Cool. Good evening, everybody. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 4 and 5 tonight. Go ahead and open your Bibles there. The questions are available in the back if you need to pick those up. And so those will be for tonight and for Sunday. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer, and we can get going. Our Father in heaven, thank you for another wonderful day that you have provided to us. We thank you for the opportunity we have here this evening. We recognize the blessing we have to open your word, the opportunity we have to grow as individuals, but also as a group together here this evening. Father, please bless us in this pursuit. Please help us to learn more about you. Please help us to learn how we should live in all these things. We ask everything in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, 1 Samuel chapter 4 and 5. You guys hopefully are picking up on my pattern by now, but I'd like to go ahead and read chapter 4, dive into that, and then chapter 5 kind of deals with the fallout from chapter 4, so it kind of fits well in this situation to kind of break it up. All right, 1 Samuel chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. And the word of Samuel came to all Israel. Now Israel went out to battle against the Philistines. They encamped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines encamped at Aphek. The Philistines drew up in line against Israel, and when the battle spread, Israel was defeated before the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 men on the field of battle. And when the people came up to camp, the elders of Israel said, "Why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord here from Shiloh, that it may come among us and save us from the power of our enemies." So the people sent to Shiloh and brought from there the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts, who is enthroned on the cherubim. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant. As soon as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came into the camp, all Israel gave a mighty shout, so that the earth resounded. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shouting, they said, "What does this great shouting in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" And when they learned that the ark of the Lord had come to the camp, the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "A god has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us! Who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with every sort of plague in the wilderness. Take courage and be men, O Philistines, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and Israel was defeated, and they fled every man to his home. And there was a very great slaughter, for 30,000 foot soldiers of Israel fell. And the ark of God was captured, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, died. A man of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh the same day, with his clothes torn and with dirt on his head. When he arrived, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and he told the news, all the city cried out. When Eli heard the sound of the outcry, he said, "What is the uproar?" Then the man hurried and came and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were set so that he could not see. And the man said to Eli, "I am he who has come from the battle. I fled from the battle today." And he said, "How did it go, my son?" He who brought the news answered and said, "Israel has fled from before the Philistines, and there has been a great defeat among the people. Your two sons also, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of the covenant has been captured." As soon as he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For the man was old and heavy. He had judged Israel 40 years. Now his daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant, about to give birth, and when she heard the news that the ark of God was captured, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she bowed and gave birth, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman attending her said to her, "Do not be afraid, for you have borne a son." But she did not answer or pay attention. And she named the child Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel." because the ark of God had been captured, and because of her father-in-law and her husband. And she said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." All right, that's chapter 4. Let's take a look here at some of the events. Now, chapter 4, just to kind of cover the first part of the initial verse, does kind of wrap up where chapter 3, it does kind of wrap up chapter 3. So we finished chapter 3, if you turn back a page or look just above chapter 4. We talked about Samuel growing up in the Lord, God blessing him, not allowing any words that Samuel said to fail. So basically his prophecies, everything that was proceeding from his mouth came to pass just as God blessed him to be able to do that. And so it kind of finishes, "And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the way of the Lord." And then if you continue on, "And the word of Samuel came to all Israel." So that's how as we talk a lot about chapters and things like that, this is kind of, I think, a perfect example of when a chapter partition clearly seems man-made and not necessarily significantly tied to, oh, wow, this really fits in right at the start of chapter 4. But it is kind of important to note it wraps up this story that we just talked about with Samuel. And now we're moving away from Samuel. And at the start of 1 Samuel, if you are moving away from Samuel, you are moving to something poor. Something bad is happening generally. So we're about to move from the focus on Samuel. So what is the situation at the beginning of chapter 4, John? Yeah, so Eli would definitely have been a very prominent figure since he is judge. He's been judging Israel, and he's the high priest, so you don't get much more of a prominent position than that. But yeah, Samuel has taken over this position of this prophet, right, that has gained this recognition throughout Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, and people know about him, and he is highly esteemed by these men that have begun to learn about Samuel. So now, with that, we transition into kind of gaining a setting of how everything is going in the country of Israel at this time. So in chapter 4, what is the situation that is, taken hold in Israel? Where are things at currently with the country? Right at the start in chapter 4. You got to take the easy ones, guys. Take the easy ones. Yeah, they're at war, right? They're in battle against the Philistines, which they have been repeatedly, right? That this has been something that's occurred. It's a very prominent enemy for Israel since the time of Samson. So now this is still continuing on here as the Philistines have kind of become a fairly formidable force at this time for Israel. And so they're going up in battle against the Philistines. What happens? Just kind of right off the bat. We don't get much introduction, just they go up and they're fighting against the Philistines. And what happens very quickly on in chapter 4, the first go-round? They get smacked. That's a good way to say it. 4,000 of them get smacked, to be specific, right? So we have this first interaction, the Philistines at Aphek, Israel camps at Ebenezer, and they go up in line against one another, and 4,000 of the Israelites die. Now, that sets the stage, and I think the interesting part is how Israel responds to that. What is their response after this battle? Who knows how many battles have occurred if this is the first? Randy, what's their response? No, I think there is a sense of perspective and understanding, and yet there's a large amount of ignorance here, right? So I think is what Randy's hitting on is the fact of like, they were on the right track of kind of the initial question, right? In verse 3, so it says, and when the people came to the camp, the elders of Israel said, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? So they had the, understanding enough to be like, God definitely wasn't with us, right? They had that kind of foresight to be able to, I shouldn't say foresight, hindsight to be like, okay, God was not with us. But we also see the ignorance then in their response, right? First off, the fact that they're confused already shows their ignorance. Why is God not with us? Well, based on some of the stuff we said previously, whether you want to touch on Judges or you want to touch on Hophni and Phinehas, why do you think God might not have been with these people? Because this is kind of interesting in that we dive right into this battle, so it doesn't give us this huge setup, which we a lot of times do see with Israel going up in battle against people where there's a back and forth with, high-ranking officials or kings, or, clearly there's a clear lack of interaction, or there is a clear interaction with God. Here it just kind of dives right into it. Drawn in line, boom, the battle, and this happens. But what do we know from context of the people at Shiloh, the people of this time? What do we know about these people? Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yeah. So the simple question of why has the Lord defeated us generally tells you, the Lord wasn't with you, right? If he was with you, you would not have been defeated. They asked the question, and the question itself already has a built-in answer. If God is with you, you aren't defeated. So in this situation, they should have the answer, all right, God clearly is not with us. Now, we've talked about, from the end of Judges, we've seen how wicked these people have gotten. And what have we seen about their leaders even right now? What do we know about their leaders in Shiloh particularly, but just leaders of Israel? What do we know about them? Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Eli last class. Eli seems to have lived a righteous life for the most part. We do have this small issue with how he's raised his sons. In some way, God has condemned him for that. But the problem with Eli is he's very old, right? He's 98 years old at this point. We saw him last class where, he's trying to reach out to his sons and tell them, hey, don't do this wicked stuff. I hear you're doing all these evil things. You're taking the things from God that should be for God and taking them for yourselves. But it's falling on deaf ears. Like, he doesn't have an impact. There's not much authority behind those words. And, he's an old man. All right, we've been told that multiple times at this point. So the leadership has kind of fallen to Hophni and Phinehas, who are leading the worship, or whatever they're calling worship now, at Shiloh, where the ark is, where all this focus is laid, where people's attentions are drawn to. And while Samuel is there, we still do have an incredibly negative source of leadership there as well, right? Where these two men are leading the people astray. They're setting an incredibly evil tone for everyone. There is no godly focus. There is no godly knowledge of how these people are worshiping, because the worship leaders don't know God, right? That was the first introduction we were given to these men, is what Ken said. They're worthless. Why were they worthless? They didn't know God. The spiritual leaders don't know God at this time. And we've seen when the leadership doesn't know God, and we're going to see this through, all the kings that are to follow. If the leadership doesn't know God, who else isn't going to know God? The people, right? It's happened every time, right? We never see a chapter, we never see where it's like the king was exceedingly wicked and the people stood up and were totally righteous in the entire reign of this evil king. It's like, no, the people fall in line with the leadership. Go ahead, John. Yeah, so let's let's kind of continue on with that. So we've set the stage here for where the people are at. They've suffered this grand defeat. They ask this question, and so their response is what we would think it should be, in that, hey, we need God to be with us, right? But their response isn't like, go to God. It's, we're going to bring what? They're going to bring the ark. The ark is God in this situation. Yeah. And John mentioned they had to go into the most holy place, which was only supposed to be entered once a year, right, by the high priest to atone for the sins of the people. And they go in there and they take the ark out, and they're going to take it in battle. What exactly is the ark? What is the ark there for? What does it say in Exodus 25? Why did God have them build the ark? What was that going to be? What happens at the ark? Yeah, it's got some items, right? Right. So here in verse 21 through 22 of Exodus 25, when it's describing about building up the ark, and you shall put the mercy seat on top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. There I shall meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you about all that I will give you in the commandments for the people of Israel. So at its core, right, the mercy seat was placed on top of the ark. The ark was the location where God would come meet with the people. God is not the ark, though, is he? Right? That's the meeting place. This is the gathering place, right? It's like us, I mean, weird connection, but it would be like us thinking like God is the church building, right? Us meeting here to worship God, like in some weird way. You know, if we could just take the church building everywhere, God would always be with us, right? That, like, we know that that's nonsense. Now, mainly because it's not portable, but, right, the issue there is the idea of God meets them at the ark. God isn't the ark, okay? So this idea, which, what is the idea? What do they call this in the Bible repeatedly when you think a God is an object? What is that called? Yeah, it's an idol. And we're going to see plenty in chapter 5 how the Philistines viewed their idol and what happens there. But is what the Israelites doing anything different? I mean, before we even get to chapter 5 and see how Dagon is, are the Israelites treating God any differently? No, right? They're saying, God, if we take this, you have to come with us, right? Like, I mean, essentially, that's what they're saying. If we take this, which, you know, we put on our shoulders or whatever, we're carrying them through with the rings and the poles through the rings, hey, I mean, it's over. We win, okay? This is a guaranteed victory. I'll probably repeat this again. These two chapters really split up into showing how little people knew about God. Not just the Philistines, but also the Israelites. Both sides in these two chapters show how very little they know about God. Who God is, what God's capable, and in chapter 5 especially, we see some of the capabilities of what God can do and how God will show people who think they, you know, can conquer or control him in some way. All right, so yeah, these are things where it's like, I mean, I feel like we could get really bogged down with like, why doesn't God just strike them dead? Why does God allow them to take the ark out anyway? But I also feel like we learn a lot more about how God isn't the objects that he had the people build for him, right? Like, he's not the tabernacle. He's not, in future, he's not going to be the temple. He's not the ark, right? He can use those things, but those are not him. Those do not encapsulate him. Those do not summarize who God is, right? And I think we're going to see that a lot because the Israelites and the Philistines think if we have possession of this, God is essentially subject to us, right? If Dagon's here with us in our temple where we put him, we're good. If we take God, if we take the ark, God is in subjection to Dagon, right? And by connection in subjection to us, the Philistines. That's their line of thinking, which is total nonsense. Yeah. Yeah, let's get to that. So after they go and get the ark, and who leads the ark out there with them? Who's behind this? What two men take the ark out with them? Yeah, there they are again. All right, this isn't like the army came and got it, which at this time there wasn't really a set army. It was kind of more like a militia style, but they come and get the ark. But the leadership, the spiritual leaders of that time, hey, they're going out there with it. Like, hey, we're behind this. We support this. They didn't just take it by force from us at Shiloh. Like, we're supporting this. And John mentioned it, but the people, they get excited, right? There's that initial jolt of enthusiasm. There was this lady a couple years ago who she was an old lady, like almost 100 years old. She was supporting, I think, like Loyola Chicago or something. And they were kind of going on this Cinderella run throughout the NCAA tournament. And she would keep going to all these games because she's the inspiration. She's making this, grand gesture, and they get enthusiastic and fired up, and they just kept winning. And so it's kind of like this kind of, hey, a good luck charm. Now it's not even the presence of God. It's almost like just relegated to like, hey, this is just a hype video to watch before we go out there and do something. Like it's your favorite song to listen to when you're running before you get totally miserable from running, right? That's what running's all about. How much longer can I avoid thinking about how miserable I am running out here right now? Probably not the right person to talk about running. Somebody else can talk about that. But we get here. They brought out the ark. There's this initial enthusiasm. Then I like how it switches perspectives, right? We don't just stay with Israel right there. We flip over to the Philistines. What goes on in their camp when they hear this excitement? Because they say some interesting things. Fear, right? They're initially afraid. They're overcome with fear by hearing this. Because why? What do they say has come into the Hebrew camp? Yeah, keep going, boss. Yeah. They recognize the feats of God beforehand. And so in verse 6, what does this great shouting mean? They learn that the ark has been brought in. But I like that phrase in verse 7. The Philistines were afraid, for they said, a god has come into the camp, right? A god, right? We've got our God, but now it's getting serious because they brought their God in, right? Once again, showing the ignorance of these two sides. Not only how the Israelites are acting, but now we get the ignorance of the Philistines. Okay? Woe to us, for nothing like this has happened. Who can deliver us from the power of these mighty gods? All right, now it's multiple gods, right? Now we've got multiple gods here that are involved. So now we've really got a problem if we're the Philistines. Now, what have these gods done, according to Philistines? Go ahead, Randy. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't. I'll need to look that up. That's an interesting thing. But like, yeah, regardless, being in this time period, right? So you're not watching it on the news, right? They're just hearing it from word of mouth. Like, oh yeah, those guys destroyed the greatest empire in the world at that time, right? To that point, and really before we get to the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, like the Egyptians were unmatched. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John. Okay, all right. So I'll take your word on that one. So it's been a while, right? So it's been a continual story passed on. Sorry, go ahead. I believe so, yeah. There you go. Yeah, I should have been able to do the math. Yeah, so it's been a while, but yes, this is a message that has been heard. People know about this God or gods in Israel, right, as they termed it, but they're afraid. These guys struck down the Egyptians. They brought every sort of plague. But what do they decide? Do they turn tail and run, or what do they decide? Yeah, right. Here's what I think is so fascinating about this part. Everything that they respond with is exactly what the Israelites hope is going to happen, right? Now, the Israelites are ignorant and foolish enough to think God is like technically with them because they brought the ark out and they can't lose. But all this reaction is what normally, when people recognize God is with them, this is how the enemies of the Israelites, these are how the enemies of God are eventually going to respond. Whether they do it before battle or during the battle, they come to this realization of hopelessness. But starts out how Israel wants them to. Like, hey, if they see, God's with us, they're gonna tuck tail and run. But, Randy mentioned it, they don't. They decide, hey, let's go and let's fight it out. Let's go fight it out and take these people on. So what happens here? What happens after they decide to fight? Yeah, way worse, right? Way worse. So the first time, 4,000 people is a lot of people, right? I'm sure you guys know this now coming in on Sundays as we've kind of gotten a little bit more crowded, right? That's a lot of people, and I don't even know, what are we like, in the 200s there? I am the worst person at estimating stuff. Like, I feel like if somebody asked me how many people do we have, I'd be like 82. And like somebody would be like, there was like 30, Caleb. Like, don't be ridiculous. But I'm not good at estimating. But 4,000 people is a ton of people. Sunday mornings here, seeing like 250 like people is a lot of people. 30,000 people is a lot of people. All right. Everybody in here's seen roadkill before, right? We don't normally think about it this way, but roadkill is gross. All right, roadkill is nasty. Now, we're normally fortunate to just kind of speed on by it, and, if you have a weak stomach, you just kind of, drive without looking over to the side. But roadkill's gross. Somebody's cleaning that up, right? Whether it's a deer, whatever animal it is, like somebody's cleaning that. I've never seen 30,000 dead anything. The amount of the smell, the blood, the amount of just square area that's just dead bodies, right? People will show cool shots of, in the NFL draft, it was up in Detroit, and they showed like a camera shot of all these thousands and thousands of people that came to the NFL draft, right? Those are just living people walking around. It's totally different when you're talking about dead bodies sprawled out all over the ground. Just a horrific sight, right? So I know it takes place in one quick verse, but like, don't overlook the fact that the evil has led to extreme amounts of death. The books of the Judges, extreme amounts of death have occurred because of how wicked Israel has gotten, because of how wicked these other nations are. This is what sin causes. This is the kind of death that it causes. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, however many were killed for the Philistines as well. Yeah, they're all dead. They're all laid out there at minimum of 30,000 because that's what we're told, right? I know at the very least those are the Israelites that died, and that's assuming every Philistine survived. And the sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas are among those who died. Now, we already knew that was going to happen because God said it was going to happen. All right, and so reading this, we should see, all right, God followed through on the promise he told to Eli for the sins that those men had committed, for the way they blasphemed God. This was their end. This was coming to them. This was assured to them because of their wickedness. All right, and so kind of moving past that, we'll kind of do the last part of chapter 4 fairly quickly. Man comes back to Shiloh to tell everybody the news. And Eli kind of overhears the uproar. What's Eli's response when he finds out what happened at the battle? Yeah, falls back, breaks his neck, dies. All right, now I kind of sped past this, so I know we didn't directly address it. His sons died, but what makes him fall over in his chair? What is the true tragedy that happens at the site of the battle? The ark's taken, right? Now, once again, here is another situation where it's like Eli's reaction, the people's reaction, his daughter-in-law, right, Phinehas' wife, her reaction is this idea of the ark being taken. Once again, it's the foolish, epiphany that they finally come to, where it's like, now God is no longer with us, right? That is essentially how they wrap up this chapter. Did you know now the Lord has departed Israel, right? Now, this is the conclusion they should have come to in the first battle, and even before then, when they were worshiping God the wrong way, when their leadership was sinning outright, was sleeping with women at the gate, was stealing what was for God and making it for themselves. Like, they should have come to the realization of the wicked things they were doing. But now, once the ark is taken, this does bring them to that final realization, God is not with us, right? Now, we knew that beforehand from the context and from everything we've seen in their lack of success in battle. They are now fully realizing it. Once the ark is taken, they come to this realization, God is no longer with us. He has left us. And the ark has been taken, and now they are just in this place of, I think it's very fitting how Phinehas' wife, the way she names her son, Ichabod, because it says the glory has departed, right? The glory has departed from Israel. And so there is no hope. Now there is no going back and grabbing the ark and hoping that is the rallying call. There will no longer be anything brought into the camp to spearhead a revolution to overtake the Philistines. We are now in a total depraved state with no hope. All right, that's their line of thinking now. That's how we wrap up chapter 4. Okay? So while chapter 4 is interesting to me because there is the appearance that God is on the mind of the people, right? There is the appearance that they want to have God involved. God is not involved, right? God is not with the Israelites. God is not blessing them. God is not acting in the way that they think he should act because they don't know God, because they don't understand how God acts. They don't understand how they are meant to act in worship to God. And so God is no longer with them. The ark has been taken as a further sign to show, yes, God is not with you. Chapter 5 is a transition to show the Philistines, God is now not with you either, just in case you get that false idea in your head. Let's go ahead and read chapter 5. It's a little bit shorter. But in case any Philistine fans were thinking this was a victory to carry over several chapters, things get pretty bad for them pretty soon. So let's read chapter 5. When the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it to the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they rose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. The hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he terrified and afflicted them with tumors, both Ashdod and its territory. And when the men of Ashdod saw how things were, they said, the ark of the God of Israel must not remain with us, for his hand is hard against us and hard against Dagon our God. So they sent and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, what shall we do with the ark of the God of Israel? They answered, let the ark of the God of Israel be brought around to Gath. So they brought the ark of the God of Israel there. But after they brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic, and he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that the tumors broke out on them. So they sent the ark of God to Ekron. But as soon as the ark of God came to Ekron, the people of Ekron cried out, they have brought around to us the ark of the God of Israel to kill us and our people. They sent therefore and gathered together all the lords of the Philistines and said, send away the ark of the God of Israel, and let it return to its own place, that it may not kill us and our people. For there was a deathly panic throughout the whole city. The hand of God was very heavy there. The men who did not die were struck with tumors, and the cry of the city went up to heaven. All right. So talking about fallout from chapter 4, we don't see fallout in Israel. We're seeing the fallout in the victory of the Philistines. So they've just won this great victory. They've conquered the Israelites. They've defeated them in great fashion. They've taken the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, all right, this most precious symbol for the Israelites that they thought was going to be their rallying call. And so now they bring this back with them to Ashdod, all right, which is one of these 5 major cities of the Philistines, and we'll see the other two. Ekron kind of is where it ends up before eventually they move it on from there. But we see these are a few of the large cities that kind of made up the people of the Philistines. So they bring the ark back. Just a quick context lesson. Why bring the ark back? What does that signify? Why take the ark? They don't believe in the God of the people of Israel. Why bring the ark back? What does that signify? All right, so it's kind of this. What, John? Say that again. Who's we? Oh, you're jumping to the end. Why do they take the ark back to their home? Why do they take it with them? Right, it's a symbol of dominance, right? I go in, I take what's yours, and I take it back, right? It's very symbolic with what Jesus had to do, right? When it uses that imagery of, you have to go into the strong man's house and bind him. So he had to go into death, defeat death, right? That's how it's this idea of like, we're going to go into Israel and we're going to take what gives Israel its strength, and we've conquered over that, right? This is their symbol of strength. We take it and it becomes ours. It becomes our prize, our spoils, right? That's just the way things would go. And you would take it back to your temple or whatever. Very common cultural story, Trojan horse, right? Was supposed to be there to bless the Greeks on their way home. The Trojans are like, we'll take it and it'll become a blessing for us and they'll be cursed. And lo and behold, that turned out super well for them. If you don't know the story, it's in a book somewhere. But all right, so they bring it back. What happens? It gets bad pretty quick, but I just want somebody to tell me what happens. Because first it starts with Dagon. So what happens to Dagon when they bring it back to the temple? Falls over. That's just the first night though, right? Could have happened. Could have been a breeze. Everybody's had something spill over, a lamp, statue, giant fish. I think it's like a fish I did a study on it a long time ago, but I think it's like a fish god with like arms and stuff like that. So, I'm sure this giant thing made out of gold toppled over all the time. Okay, that's just the first night. Second night, what happens? That might be the greatest comment I've ever heard you say, Jess. It was worse, is what Jess said. Things got a little bit worse, right? Topples over, but chops off his head, chops off his hands. Before we even continue on with this, what does that show? Why that happen? Why not just topple over and break into a million pieces the first night? Does anybody have an idea? Right. It's that kind of annoying thing where everybody's had that moment of pure greatness, right? Where you have done something totally amazing. And that one person in your life that has to immediately chop out your legs from under you has to say, that's the luckiest thing I've ever seen, right? And the thing that you hate more than anything is that you will never do that one thing again. And so you will never convince them of how great you were in that one moment, right? So that was so lucky, you'll never be able to do that again. And then you'll spend the next 4 hours trying to do whatever it is you did that first time. But, right, hey, if he topples over and breaks, could blame it on some random, servant that's in the temple or whatever. He knocked it over or whatever. Like, we can explain that. But first night it topples over, we bring the ark in. Okay, we go back in. Next night happens again. And this time it breaks in kind of a very strange, unnatural sounding way where the head chops off and somehow the arms chop off. Yeah, tell. Yeah, that's good. I hadn't even thought of that, but, right? So it's like there's these two things put in this high esteem, and clearly whatever the positions they put the things in there, I have no doubt the Dagon idol was in a place of greater prominence, right, and compared to where the ark was. And now it's brought to showing its total insignificance. This God can't keep itself from falling over. It can't keep itself from breaking into a million pieces, right? It's just a different form of what we read with the story of Elijah, right, on Mount Carmel. Same kind of thing. Tim, did you have a comment?
Separation of the head, I think, means a lot too. Because it points out separation from the head, that's cutting it off. We know if we get separated from our head, that our life is over. And I feel like there's some symbolism.
Yeah, very good. So not only the idea of like bowing to the ark, or bowing to God, but also the idea of bowing, of just totally being chopped off at the head. John, and then, yeah.
I'm going to say that looking at it from God's point of view, he said, now the first time, I didn't convince you. I'm going to convince you this time.
Yeah, kind of Randy's comment of like, there's no coincidence here. If you were confused, let me do it one more time, show you I could do it multiple times. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, I think that fits very well with verse 6, right? Where now we see the hand of the Lord was heavy upon them, right? So where their idol is struck down is headless and handless, I guess if we want to use that phrase, God's hand is going to be heavy upon them. So now this is the first time where we see God in these two chapters, right? This is where we actually see God, not an instrument that is used in the worship to God, not the place where God is going to meet his people on the mercy seat, where the mercy seat is sitting. This is actually God being involved here. And now it says, the hand of the Lord was heavy against the people of Ashdod, and he strikes them with tumors. Okay? I know at that point they're realizing, all right, that statue thing was not a coincidence, right? Like things are going bad quickly. All right? How did the people of Ashdod respond to this? What do they start thinking? What do they want to do? Get it out, right? This was a huge mistake. And as bad as this went, I think the dumbest thing almost in this chapter is that their whole solution is, Send it to our other city over there for them to take care of it, right? So clearly a lot of brotherly love going on between these cities, right? So it goes from Ashdod to where's the second city? Gath, right? Gath is going to pop up a little bit later, right? 1 Samuel. But what happens there? Things go well for him at Gath or what? Things go poorly, right? After they brought it around, the hand of the Lord was against the city, causing a very great panic, and he afflicted the men of the city, both young and old, so that tumors broke out on them. All right, same thing. All right, third time's the charm. They go to Ekron. What does it say happens here? It's slightly different, but what does this say happens here in verse 11? They were the one smart group that's like, okay, we're not going to do it, all right? We're not going to let this come in here. Things are not going to go well here. Like, we like our hometown, but we're not confident enough that it can overcome whatever sort of evil is coming from this, right? Or whatever judgment is coming from this. And so they're like, get it out. Don't send this here. But it had gotten to the point where it's even mentioned in the second stop, right? When it's in Gath, the people begin to panic. Right? There's not only the tumors and things, but now it's a full city recognizing the cause of this is here. We know where this is coming from. This is because we brought the Ark of the Covenant here. All right? So there's the panic of, as long as this is here, the heavy hand of the Lord is going to be upon us. And it is not going to depart from us until this departs from us. And so it goes to Ekron. They start to panic. They say, hey, we got to get this out of here. Deathly panic was throughout the whole city, right? Everybody, I know I use the term of like everybody has seen this or whatever, but I think we've all at some point in time had someone, whether it's us, you want to admit it's you, or you know someone who in some situation, maybe it's a great important situation or it's the least significant situation, someone has panicked, all right? I have seen a person panic before, and usually it's around some sort of, hey, people are coming over, things are not clean, or there is no food, right? I think last year or 2 years ago, the fridge broke, and so like all of Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving meals were like spoiled. Like all the breads had gone bad, the bread, the meats, everything was spoiled and stuff like that. That was the morning of Thanksgiving. So like, ask my mom how she was doing that day, but we figured it out. We're fine. We're good. But that, like the idea of a panic of just like, oh my goodness, things are bad. Things are going to get worse. Like there's something wrong. We can't fix it, right? That's how an entire city is feeling. And not even this city. All the cities feel this, right? So it's like it's in Ekron now, but Ashdod felt that. Gath felt that. The other two prominent cities of the Philistines are going to feel that, right? Because they have witnessed now the power of God. The God that they initially were afraid was going to be there when the ark was first brought out by the people of Israel, they are now laying witness to who that God is. Now they are seeing the God that they were so afraid of. But the point is, chapter 4, Israel didn't know who God was. And now in chapter 5, the Philistines are beginning to realize a little bit of who God is, right? Now they're seeing the power of God. But both chapters show the misunderstanding that these two nations had over who truly is God, right? Like the Philistines kind of knew the history of God, but they thought it was multiple gods. They thought he was located just in the ark, whatever. They had an incomplete understanding. The Israelites, who should know who God is, who should remember these things that the Philistines remembered, they forgot who God was, right? But I think chapter 5, though, it kind of ties in with Galatians. God's not going to be mocked here. You're not just going to take God as a prize and think that he's just going to stand back there and be like, okay, like even though, yeah, the Ark of the Covenant is not God, you aren't just going to parade around this item that is meant to be in worship to God. You're not going to parade it around as your victory trophy. Like, and God humbles them quite quickly. Go ahead, John. You can wrap us up. Yeah, why did none of these people that God has to, lay the smackdown on, how come none of them are like, we should pick that guy next time? Why don't they think that way? I don't know. Why? That's what I think I would have done that, but who knows? I think that's a good point to end on, right? We'll be in chapter 6, picking up there on Sunday. Thanks everybody for your comments.